Hello and welcome to the Unity and Diversity Podcast, pursuing unity and healing through open dialogue and intentional relationships. Unity and Diversity is a conversation amongst friends, hosted by Jordan Priscilla Gray and Floyd and Ebony Rogers, coming to you from the great city of Fayette, Alabama. We invite you to join us now as we dive into today's topic. Well, good afternoon, and welcome back to Unity and Diversity, a podcast all about open dialogue and sharing, specifically as it relates to racial conversations. I'm Jordan Gray. I'm here with Priscilla Gray, Ebony Rogers, Floyd Rogers. How y'all doing?
Doing good. Good to be back together again.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's been a couple of weeks, so we
well, I guess
ready.
on live.
Yeah, that's right.
We have been together, but not on live.
That's right. That's right.
Good to be back together.
We were just together yesterday.
On live. Right.
All
right.
weekend. Yeah, all weekend. But
Right.
good. It's good to be here. Yes, exactly.
So how are y'all feeling about this podcast, so far? This is going to be our, third time we've gotten together for this?
Yeah.
How are y'all feeling?
I think it's great. I think that the discussion is really good. I think for us, or even just for our relationship, I think it's been really powerful because it just kind of helps us to know each other, see each other, hear each other's experiences. So I think it's been good.
Yeah.
And we hope we're helping someone else so they can feel comfortable having
right.
conversations like this with, either other people who they're associated with, maybe co-workers, friends of that nature, that they can just have open conversations about race, stereotypes, culture, and to make it okay.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. Yeah, because Ebony and I, we are always talking about, which is funny because in our relationships, we've talked about how it doesn't really feel like we're so very different. Actually, Ebony and Jordan are more alike, and Floyd and I are more alike. And so, there's a lot of similarities. There's not really a lot of differences, but there are some of these funny things like charcuterie board.
I'm still struggling with pronouncing that. And she saw it today on Facebook, and she was like, "That's the same thing we do. We just don't call it that." We call it a cheesy cracker board.
So we still have fun.
That's like what 95% of white dudes say as well. Call it what you want, us cheese and crackers.
Yeah. But, one of the things I just wanted to kind of call out is just that it is so important to have these types of conversations within trusted relationships.
Absolutely.
Because if I don't trust you, I'm not going to want to share things about my group or my life that may come across as weaknesses, because then you may judge me or you won't accept me. And so it is important to have those relationships where you can trust each other and love each other and know hey, even if I shared this, you're not going to start thinking bad things about me, and you're still going to accept me. So,
and I think the other thing too is with that is that you don't want to offend anyone.
That's right.
So if you don't have the relationship, you
Right.
don't have that trust, you may easily offend someone. It could just be from ignorance, not knowing, not intentionally doing it, just because you don't know. So it's good that we can talk and we can say, hey, well, I didn't know that. Well, did you know this? And it's okay because it's open, it's honest, it's genuine.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I think that was such a big wow when we talked about that, because both sides don't realize that the other side feels the exact same way. And I don't even mean to make it sides, but it's white people are thinking, well, I don't want to be offensive. Black people thinking, well, I don't want to be offensive. Everybody's thinking the same thing. I don't want to say
So it just keeps you quiet.
Exactly.
Right.
Nobody said anything.
In your corner or on your side of the track.
Exactly.
Not realizing that
We're together.
we have the same
Yes.
thing.
Yes.
We have the potluck, we got the barbecue.
Yeah,
Everybody get to the potluck.
Come on, man.
Come on to the barbecue.
What was that? There was that picture that we used in marriage coaching a lot, where it's a sculpture that was done with the two figures facing opposite ways, like they're mad at each other and talking to each other. But then you have within the sculpture an inner child sculpture, and each person is longing to reach out towards the other person.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
And that really feels like what we're doing here. So
Absolutely.
I like that.
We
too.
want
See that in
unity.
kids.
Yes.
Jackson's got friends that he sees in Walmart all the time, and they run up on each other and they hug each other.
Yeah.
They're little boys, you don't see that with grown-ups.
Absolutely.
Much.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it's always a different race,
It's always a different race.
And it's okay. It's just, childlike play. They don't even see anything wrong with it.
Childlikeness.
Yes.
That's exactly
Yes.
that's kind of our goal as
Absolutely.
Christians, even, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we hope you'll bear with us as we get some of the technical sides of what we're doing down. We decided this week to go back to the Facebook Live format because it's just so much more accessible. It seemed like a lot of people really wanted that. We are still going to do the podcast and the YouTube video off of this Facebook Live.
Right.
Also, I don't know if you can see in the shot there, we're on one little microphone in this room, and so the audio, we're still working on that as well. But we hope to turn this into an ongoing thing that we really hope is helpful.
Yeah.
We know it's been helpful for us,
Absolutely.
but for so many in the community. We're going to continue a conversation that we started last time about stereotypes. We kind of opened up the conversation about stereotypes and we talked about 2 specific stereotypes. We're going to continue that conversation and talk about a few more today. But just to kind of get back into that conversation, we talked about how stereotypes, there's not really anything inherently bad about them. It's just generalizations where I'm just observing what I generally see, and I don't generally see a lot of black country music stars. I don't generally see a lot of white rappers. I might see one every now and then, but the stereotype is just reality as I usually see it. And that's what we're talking about here. But of course, along with that, the reason that we're even talking about this is because they can promote hurtful attitudes. They can present problems, and they can just be flat out untrue at times.
That's right.
And so it's something that we want to talk through, especially some of these very emotional stereotypes, the ones that have been very hurtful over the years. We want to talk about those and just deflate the ugly power out of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Expose them,
That's right.
bring God's healing truth into it, and find unity in the discussion.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing today, carrying on from last time. We threw out there, we did a Facebook poll a couple of weeks ago that we started with last time. There's a lot of stereotypes out there. I'm going to read through the list again, but they were funny. We had a good laugh. Sometimes they're funny. Sometimes they can cause a lot of pain. The thing that we threw around the circle last time, and I don't know if we want to spend too much time on this year, is there's pitfalls embedded in a lot of these stereotypes.
Yeah.
Anything that y'all wanted to kind of recap from last time before we go on to these next couple of stereotypes this time? Anything that y'all wanted to say as far as recap?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that we talked about is just that when you are looking at stereotypes and it's one of those that kind of creates a blockage, then like it prevents you from getting to know a person.
Yes.
Like it prevents you from
Yes.
getting to know like an individual, because stereotypes aren't always true, but even if it's true, it's not the whole story. So
Right.
it prevents you from knowing that person.
And I want to touch on is basically what you just said, but kind of the coin term that we heard before we started the first one, that relationships ruin racism.
Yes.
I love that.
And even with us, our relationship, we can pretty much say anything to each other,
Yes.
and we'll sit down and have a conversation about
Absolutely.
that. Most people won't open up and have these type of conversations because there's not a relationship
That's
there.
right. That's
but
right.
because we have a relationship, we can actually talk about anything.
That's right.
So I want to throw that out there. That's definitely one of the reasons why we are having this also. We want to encourage people that there's nothing wrong with us having relationships.
Amen.
Actually, people won't even trust you unless you have a relationship with them. People don't really want to listen to you unless you have a relationship with them. Even in the ministry, as a minister, I realize that there's certain groups of individuals that I can't sit down and talk to unless I first form a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I consider myself a minister, a carrier of the gospel, I should be willing to go out of my way to
That's
build
right.
rightful relationships with anyone,
That's right.
That's right.
especially non-believers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that is so good.
Okay, well let's just get right into it this week. We've got I hope we get to it. We'll see what the time allows for, but we've got 2 more stereotypes that relate to black people and 2 more stereotypes that relate to white people that we're ready to discuss this afternoon. As I said last week, or 2 weeks ago actually, we could talk about all kinds of ethnicities, Russian stereotypes, Latino, Jew stereotypes. These don't just relate to white and black, but that's we've decided to narrow it down to that for this discussion. The first stereotype for this week is that black people are better at physical things, white people are better at mental things. Some of the ones that we received on our Facebook poll that kind of play into this, white people can't jump. You've seen the movie. White people can't jump. They can't dunk basketball. They can't clap on rhythm. Black people. What's one of the stereotypes was the only nerds out there are white people. Only white people can be nerdy. It's not true.
There's Steve Urkel.
Well, yeah, exactly. He's like the nerd. Right? But that's the stereotype.
That was our nerd representative.
So some statistics, just kind of stepping into this. So the U.S. population, if you look at our whole country, it's about 14% black, 75% white, and then other nationalities mixed in between. But you look at some of the organizations out there, the NBA, athletic organizations. NBA is 73.2% black, 16.8% white, and then some other nationalities. NFL, 53% black, 24% white. If you look at not just the U.S., but if you look at 100-meter record holders, sprinters, they're like all black, almost all black. However, you go to some other sports, Major League Baseball, only 6% black, 60% white. You look at swimmers in the United States, 9% black, 73% white. So some sports, they don't quite follow that trend.
Because we can't swim.
Right.
That's what they say anyway.
You can swim, but I can't.
I can swim, but you can't.
but like the big, we get into basketball, we get into football. That's what this country, those are our sports, right? So my burning question for you, I'm curious what it's like to be born with athletic talent.
Ooh, I'm looking over here. Is there someone else in here?
Because you was a great basketball and football player, right?
What? Not me. I was always on the teams, but I never played, really. I think I was that individual. I didn't like people touching me.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But since it was the thing to do, yeah, I got on the court. I was on the field, but I never got to play. I was the bench warmer.
Man, you have been good friends.
I've never been athletic. I just never been athletic.
Yeah.
I haven't. It's something that God didn't give me. He skipped over me.
Right.
But I think, even speaking of that, I think in black culture, you're supposed to play football. You're supposed to play basketball. It's pushed so heavily. Because even like with Jackson, he said he doesn't want to play. And I know I wasn't athletic, so I'm okay with him not playing. But
and I am too.
Other family members who believe that he should play and that's what he's supposed to do as a boy. I don't necessarily believe that.
Yeah.
So there's like a peer pressure there.
Yes.
So
it's definitely a stereotype of peer pressure.
Why do you feel like that is?
That's what people see.
Yeah.
That's what they see.
And you know what? When we're in certain settings too, and people see our boys, they see Jackson, they see JC. When they walk up to them, like JC, I'm going to use JC for an example. They see how big JC is, and the first thing they say, oh man, I know you're going to be a good football player. I know you're a good athlete, in other words. I hardly ever see anyone walk up to them like, man, you're going to be a good doctor, you're going to be a good attorney, you're going to be you're going to be a president one day. You don't see people talking to our kids like that. We have to let them know, just because people don't approach you like that, you can be anything. You don't have to be involved in sports. You don't have to be.
So it's like the unspoken message is like, when I look at you, the best shot I see for you in life is if you can use your body.
Use your body.
You do something with that big strong body of yours. Yeah.
And even when you talk about the statistics, like, no one has ever said, oh, you should play to our boys, they should play baseball.
Never.
Or they should play golf. But Jackson loves to play golf. But he doesn't care about soccer, baseball, football, or anything else.
He don't like nobody touching him.
Yeah, he wants to play golf. And that's true.
He said he'll do some golf.
Yeah, and he doesn't like to sweat.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I don't know. But that's how it's been.
It feels... it's funny because before we got on this podcast, I kind of was doing a little bit of research and saw there's a debate out there right now about what they call fast twitch muscle fibers, and they've traced it back, and some people say that people of West African descent have more of these fast twitch muscle fibers, which is why there's more sprinters out there and whatnot. Some people say no, that's crazy. And it's more cultural, there's more of an expectation in the black community that's what they're going to do, and so that's what they're taught to do from a young age, and it's cultural, it's not biological. So you have this debate going back and forth.
Which I do think, even just in the South, just having boys in general, that we have kind of experienced that too, where our boys have kind of felt excluded sometimes because they're just not gung-ho athletes either, they are more interested in band and just other artsy type things versus athletics. So I do think that the South could be just more like boys are supposed to be involved in athletics as well.
It seems to be, I don't know, but it seems to be that a lot of quote unquote black stereotypes and Southern stereotypes go hand in hand, like the whole watermelon and fried chicken and cornbread stereotype. Hey, that's Southern, man. You line up any Southerner, and that's it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a black thing; it's a Southern thing.
Right. And I can see that too. I've got friends that were very athletic, and they didn't look like me. They were white guys. They were very athletic. That's just what they done.
Yeah.
Me, it wasn't something that I done.
Yeah.
On the other side of the stereotype, we talked about physical and mental. We were talking about this earlier, and I brought up this case, Larry P., back in 1971, where you basically had a group of black children that their parents had found that they'd been stuck into a class for, at the time, what they called educably mentally retarded children. That's the term for it in those days. And the parents didn't even know. They just put these kids in this classroom, and a little bit of time goes on, and then their parents start to kind of realize what has happened. Well, hold on, you took my kid out of the main classroom and put him over here, and the main classroom, they go and get an education. Yeah. They had taken these kids out and put them in this class where they're just going on the playground every day, getting playtime. So they're not even getting educated anymore. Yeah. And so you had this case in 1971 where the parents went to court, and what had happened was they had taken IQ testing in the school, and because they had scored low, that's why they were taken out of the classroom. And so it actually became illegal in California in 1971 to give an IQ test to a black child, because the idea was, how do you know that this is really a good test of where our child needs to be? Is it because they're truly behind, or is it because, the test says what color is a ruby, and they're less likely to have seen a ruby? Are these tests even fair? And even if they are fair, you're talking about a community that has, for generation after generation after generation, not been allowed to have the same level of education. And so naturally, they are not at the same level. And because they're not at the same level, you say, well, now you can't have any education. Yeah. And they stay at a lower level. So was that even a proper response, even if they didn't score high enough on the IQ? So this case was 1971, and it's really kind of opened this whole discussion over testing. Is testing fair? What do we do with the test results? And I guess just kind of throwing it around for discussion. Have you had any experiences or insights into this experience of a perpetuating cycle of keeping low education children at a low education level in such a way they never really come out of that level? Have you any insights into that?
I know from my experience, growing up in Fayette, Alabama was totally different from growing up in Detroit, Michigan. So I went to elementary school and middle school here in Fayette, Alabama. But I went to high school in Detroit, Michigan, and it was totally different. It was like night and day. I realized that what we learned in Fayette Middle School, Fayette Elementary School, were the same things that they were teaching in Detroit, Michigan public high schools.
Wow.
So we went from making A's, B's, and C's in Fayette to making almost straight A's in Detroit, Michigan. So we were like, we've done this before. This is easy. And I didn't realize the importance of education then like I do now. In my household, education wasn't stressed that this is key. Education can, the proper education can take you somewhere in life. Education wasn't important in my household. But I make it important to my kids because I don't want them to go through the same thing that I went through. And I truly believe that because of the lack of education that I had, it sent me down the wrong road. Mm-hmm. Many of you that knows me knows that I've been to prison before. And even when I got to prison, I realized that the prison system was set up just like my high school.
How so?
When I went to Detroit Public High School, I was used to seeing the chains on the doors. I was used to going through the metal detectors. I was used to seeing the police officers on the inside and on the outside. It was one way in, one way out. Cameras everywhere. That's exactly how it was when I was in prison. So when I went to prison, I was like, wow, I felt like I've been here before. And so now when I think back to the difference between the high school in Fayette, Alabama and the high school in Detroit, Michigan, it's like it was almost as if they were preparing us for prison. And I forget where I read this, but there's a statistic out now where it talks about a person that doesn't have that much as an education, they're more likely to go to prison. And so I realize now that we were being dumbed down, and I'm talking about Detroit, Michigan High School. Yeah. The things that we were learning, it was things that we had already learned before. So, now that I think back to it, I'm like, wow, was it really systematic? Was it really aimed at that point? And most of the guys that I grew up with, that I went to high school with, they're either dead or in prison. Most of them went to prison before, went to jail before, and most of them are dead. A lot of them are dead. So,
wow. And I think from that stereotype that, like you said, white people smarter, they're more mental, whereas black people more physical. I think that's the same standard where it applies to education. Like you said, in the city, they don't apply the same standard education. It's a lower level. Yeah. You're not really expected to do well. If you do, then you're an exception. Right. And once you become that exception, people will, help you, fight for you, what have you. But the other people who are not, and they're not challenged, they kind of just fall by the wayside. They fall through the cracks. And I think once you fall in those cracks and once that lower standard has been placed on you, you're never challenged. Just like those other kids who had the low IQ. Maybe they had a low IQ in first grade, second grade, but how about fifth grade? They may be excel.
Right.
But if you're never taught or challenged, then you're not going to reach that full potential.
It is interesting to me that the outcome of that case was they tested low, and so you put them in this, playground program. So the answer is, well, just don't test them anymore. That sounds like...
Just give up on them.
Just give up on them, right. Which probably sounded progressive and graceful at the time, but, you're saying no, educate them. Help them get a higher score.
That's right. Yeah. Very important.
Yeah. And I think that also changes the dynamic in your household. How do your parents feel about education? So when I was in high school, I didn't make the best of grades. But again, my mother, she was always working 2 or 3 jobs to provide. So she wasn't saying, let me go to this, parent-teacher meeting. Let me check your report card. Let me make sure you're doing well. Let me help you. Let me get you a tutor if you need extra help. Did you write that report? She was worried about, okay, I got to make sure I got food in the house. I need to pay the bills. Right. Yeah. I got to make sure I get to this next job. Because it was never just one job. It was always 2 or 3 jobs and working on the weekend. So I think that lack also follows the child wherever they go. Because if it's not important in the household, the child's not going to see it as important.
That's right.
But again, I think that even with me being in school, because I was seen as that exception, I had guidance counselor that said, no, Ebony, I want this for you. You need to go here. So that's how I ended up going to Brandeis, which is one of the top, it may be the 50 in the country now. I'm not sure. I haven't checked it lately. But it was an all-Jewish school, great school, who you have to have a 3.8 to get into. But because someone saw something different in me and they said, no, I want better for you, and they understood my story and they was compassionate about my situation, they made sure that I was ultimately enrolled there.
Right.
So... But again,
that's
it's
very
only
important.
but
Education
again,
is very important. I realize now too why, even back in the day, that they wouldn't allow slaves to read, because if you learn how to read, you were pretty much on the same playground as everyone else.
Yeah.
You know, so I understand that now. Didn't understand that growing up, how important education was.
Yeah.
but then it also shows too that it's not their ability to learn; it's their what's being important to you and what's important.
Yeah.
Because just like you can work hard and become a great athlete because someone's telling you need to do this is what's important. It's the same way with education. If you're not taught you need to read every day and you need to write this report, then you're not going to see it as important. That doesn't mean that you're not as smart or intelligent. It's just
Or
that's not able. It's not about your
Priority.
ability or a priority, right? It's just that was never taught to me that that's important.
Right, right. Yeah, that's so good. And I think too, like IQ, like so many things in human makeup, it varies between whites, between blacks. It's not just one race is this and one race is that. I mean, you talk to a white person and they could have an 80 or 100 or 120. You know, you never know. But does that make them valuable? Is that, I mean, they're useful in society? Like, that's not the only metric.
Right.
And that is not the metric by which we measure whether a human is valuable or not.
That's right.
That's true.
It's a lot more going on than that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go on. Where are we at on time, by the way?
25 minutes.
Oh, my word. We can't be short.
Already.
Can't do it. Let's go on to the next one, which is one for the white people, and that is that white people are fragile. I just want to read one of the lines from last year's top songs, and the singer actually was just stunned that he won an award for this song. He's like, "You got to be kidding me!" But the line goes, "I'm just Ken. Anywhere else I'd be a 10. Is it my destiny to live and die a life of blonde fragility?" Ken, of course, he's one of the stars of the Barbie movie that came out last year, and he plays the part of a very fragile, very insecure white man. But it ties into a trope that's been gaining momentum for about a decade now. And, blonde fragility, that's just a play on white fragility. The idea that there's a fragile white person stereotype. And where that comes from, there was a professor by the name of Robin DiAngelo, coined that term back in 2011, white fragility. And she wrote a book about it in 2018, White Fragility, Why It's So Hard for White People to Talk About Racism. She describes white fragility as a defensive response by which a white person, they defend themselves whenever their whiteness is highlighted or mentioned, or their racial worldview is challenged, whether or not they're even conscious of that defensive response. So personally, I haven't read the book. I can't really comment on the book. But as is so often the case, terms kind of take on lives of their own.
Yes. Definitely
Heard this term white fragility, and the idea that white people are just, don't talk to them about race. They can't handle it. They're too fragile for that. So I'm curious, kind of throwing this open to everybody. Have y'all ever encountered this term? Any thoughts or opinions about it?
Well, it's funny because, like, just thinking of that, just the first thought that comes to mind is like, well, I don't even know, because white people just aren't having the conversations. Like, white people aren't just having these discussions. And then, like we've talked about how, like, in the groups that I have had these discussions in, like, a lot of times black people are taken back by the fact that, like, I'm willing to have the conversation because it's just so, like, whoa, that's not typical. But, like, it just kind of reminds me of that study. I think I mentioned it in the podcast last time. I think it was from Stanford, where they researched, like, what do people want to have these conversations? Are these conversations good? And they found that these conversations are so important. Like, the racism conversations, just the race conversation in general is so important, but that white and black people alike want to have the conversation, but that a lot of times white people are afraid because they are afraid of being offensive and being labeled racist. And then black people are afraid to have the conversations because they don't want to, not be accepted by their white friends. And so, like, there's fear around having these conversations on both sides. But I think, with white people, there may be fear of, oh, I don't want to be labeled as racist, or I don't want to be offensive. So
I think that's good. And I think that, when we talk, so Priscilla and I have a ministry group. We have, about 15 women? So when Priscilla and I would mention things about race, the entire group would be shocked.
They would like hold their breath.
And they were black and white women.
Right.
And they're taken back because they're not used to hearing those conversations.
I think their eyes got a little bit big, almost like, okay, are they fighting?
Is this real? Is it okay?
Are they trying to offend each other?
Should we say anything or do we not?
So we had to just call it out there. Like
we have these conversations.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But it was shocking to know that on both sides, they're just not comfortable having these conversations.
That's right.
For whatever reason, it's a people thing.
Yes. It's a people
thing. It's not really a black or white thing.
Yeah.
But I think when you can and you're open, it's just like,
Yeah.
let me learn about you. You learn about me, and it's okay.
So freeing.
Yeah,
That I can just ask
relationships.
questions.
That's what we're talking about.
Yes.
Relationships.
Yes.
Because we're thinking about it.
You're thinking about it, yeah.
It's not like we don't think about
Yeah.
racial things.
Right.
And there are some things that we do have similarities, and so we can call that out. But then there's some things that are like, wait a second, what about hair?
That's exactly what I was thinking about. Because of course, white people's hair, y'all's hair get
Greasy.
Yes,
and you have to
does.
wash it. So
Like
Priscilla
everything.
asked me about my wigs and how do I install them, and I'm like, so we have these open conversations. Oh, okay, well, because there's things that you always want to know.
Absolutely.
You have questions, but you just never feel comfortable enough saying, "Hey, girl, can you tell me how you do this? Or how does that work?
Yeah.
Or why does it work like that?" So it's just freeing.
Yeah, it is freeing.
Yeah.
Feels good.
It's definitely something that I think that people shy away from it because of the fact, like you said, they're afraid to offend the next person. So they therefore shut down and never talk about it at all.
Yeah.
But I think that's not the solution. Just not talking about it at all.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like sweeping something under the rug, like a marriage couple, and you're just sweeping stuff under the rug, constantly sweeping stuff under the rug. And before you know it, it doesn't take but that one moment, and before you know it, you just both of you just furious. Before you know it, that'll turn into a fight, whether it's physically or verbally.
I mean, has your spouse
It could be
ever
hurtful.
just spouted off something that was
Yes.
like 5 months ago?
Yes.
You've been thinking that for that long?
And it hurts, right?
Right.
And so that's the same thing with this. I think that if we don't start building relationships and start addressing these things, we'll never be able to build the right relationships
That's right.
and the community that we need. And they're not going to just benefit us as individuals, but these type of relationships benefit our children as well.
Absolutely.
They are definitely going to be great beneficiaries from it.
What was that y'all said, JC said about this conversation?
Oh yeah, when he saw our first live, he was like, "Wow, so y'all really
Y'all
cool
friends.
right there, huh? Y'all
Like,
really
okay.
friends? Y'all hang out together for real." When he
Right.
saw y'all at the at her mom's birthday party,
yeah.
he was blown away by that.
Yeah.
So right, that's when I first saw y'all dancing. Right, so
But
for him to
it's
say
good.
that means that
It's not normal for him.
Yeah.
But that's going to affect his life
It
going
will.
forward.
Yes.
Like this is okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's not only okay when you're at school or playing sports.
Yeah.
Like, you
it's
can- Right.
around your dining room table.
Exactly. It's okay.
Right.
In your living rooms.
Yeah.
And I want to say other thing too, real quick. I'm gonna try to make this quick. But if you're just around your peers all of the time, you're never being stretched.
That's
Right.
You're
right.
never being challenged.
That's
And
right.
if you're never being stretched and never being challenged, you'll never grow.
Absolutely.
I remember this one particular time. Y'all know with the Black Lives Matter thing when all of that stuff popped off. There was a panel that I was invited to, and I was the only black guy in the room, and I felt like I was being attacked.
The only black guy.
I was the
on a Black
only
Lives
black
Matter.
guy on a Black Lives Matter panel. And I didn't know what to expect when I got there.
Yeah.
And so when I got there, I felt like I was being attacked because these particular individuals, which I consider all of them friends, I even call them brothers in Christ, they attacked the organization Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Me, I was totally ignorant to the fact that there was an organization called Black Lives Matter.
Right.
Now, I'm aware of the statement. The reason why I'm aware of the statement because I have experienced, as a black man, I have experienced racism. I've experienced racism in the prison system, in the judicial system, in the education department. I've experienced racism in these areas. So, yes, when I say Black Lives Matter, that means that I feel like I need to be heard. Right. I feel like I haven't been heard in years. People don't invite me to come speak with the congressman, the president, state representatives. I feel like I'm never at the table. I never get invited to the table, y'all. It's like you guys never invite me to hear me or my concerns within the community. So when I say I'm familiar with the statement, that means, I think we matter too. I'm familiar with that statement. Yes, Black lives do matter. Again, I didn't know anything about the organization, which I guess at that time the organization had become corrupt. It probably was formed with good intentions, but I was totally unaware that there was an organization and that they had been corrupt. They were, I guess, whatever it was. I don't want to say this live, and I don't know for sure what they were doing. But again, I wasn't aware of the organization. I was only aware of the statement. Yes, all lives matter, but I heard an example that says when people say Black Lives Matter, that means that this one particular house on the block is on fire. I can't call 911, call the fire department and say, come spray water on every house on this particular block. Because every house on this particular block is not on fire. Right now, it's just only this one particular house. And so when black people say Black Lives Matter as the statement, not the organization, just the statement, that means there's a fire in our home, in our community that needs to be put out. So again, I'm familiar with the statement, not the organization.
That's a great way to put it. And, I think it is unfortunate. I don't like the organization, but that has become an easy way to dismiss the whole statement movement. Let's pick on the fact that the organization's terrible. Well, okay, whatever. I remember when that statement kind of rose in prominence. It was, when Trayvon Martin was killed, and after Zimmerman was acquitted, the statement kind of took off from there. And I remember that was 10 years ago or more now. And at that time, I was saying the same thing. All lives matter. What are you talking about? Black lives matter. That is racist to say that, because all lives matter. And I remember there was such a defensive posture in the white community towards even that statement. Before there even was an organization that we knew of, there was a defensive posture towards that statement. And looking back, we didn't have that same viewpoint that you just shared, which is exactly it. We're not saying that Black lives matter more, or they're the only ones we care about talking about. We're saying we feel as though Black lives are being overlooked here. Black lives are not being valued as much here because there's a problem. And it wasn't just Trayvon Martin. I mean, there's case after case after case after case. Some of them, the facts are a little muddy. Some of the facts are not muddy. And yet there was a pattern. And it was like, look, there's a problem here. Let's talk about the problem. And everybody's like, it's racist. All lives matter. And I think we got to own that. Look, it's something we got to take a look at and recognize.
An ongoing thing that definitely does have to be addressed one day.
And I think kind of when go ahead. I think kind of when I started to realize there was such a fear there, with the whole Black Lives Matter statement, was when my son, my oldest son, one of his best friends was black, and they were cute little boys, and it's fine. But then as I started to see them grow up, and then it was like, okay, these are about to turn into men. And so then this sweet little black boy is going to turn into a black man, and he's going to actually have to face those things himself as well. And his mom's going to have to, fear. She doesn't have to fear. I'm not saying we don't live in fear, but there is.
You don't have to worry about the same thing.
I'm not going to have to worry about the same thing. Exactly. I'm not going to have to worry about the same thing as her. And that's when I started to realize, that statement is because there is a problem, and we don't have to deal with that same concern.
Right.
And I think that's a lot, because if the issue is not in your home, in your face, it doesn't really affect you. You don't really see it as an issue.
That's right.
It's a they problem. We're fine over here, so let's dismiss it and not even discuss it or have compassion for whoever's going through it. And similar to what you just said, a black woman, just like me, we have 2 sons. So we have to have these discussions.
That's right.
From, you can be able to, your friends may get away with something that you will not get away with.
Right.
If you guys are in a car, you need to be careful. If you interact with the police, you have to do it in a certain way so you're still protected.
That's right.
We definitely have different conversations, and we're going to have it until, obviously past when they're grown, because it's a different world for a black man living in America. And that's the truth. So we have to educate them. But again, as my white friend Priscilla, she may not have those same conversations with her kids. Yeah, right. So it's different, but I think it takes these real conversations to know that there is an issue and it is something that we have to deal with. And whether you have to deal with it or not, it's more like, okay, I understand.
Yeah. Right. And that's the thing, you're exactly right. I hear you, I believe you. And then we do need to have those conversations with our boys. Like when you are with black male friends, then, you know, what's your role in that as well? First of all, don't be getting anybody in trouble. Don't be in trouble. But then second of all, you know, you stand with them. You support.
That's what a friend does, right?
That's right.
What's bothering you? You listen to that individual. And you try to help that individual. And that's what we do as men and women of God. You know, we try to minister to other people's needs. You never know a person's needs if you're not willing to listen to them.
That's true. And just like the Trayvon Martins, the Rice, and as the list goes on, obviously what we have to do now is educate them now so they'll know, so they don't be that same victim.
That's right.
Because anytime, any moment, something can happen. And if they're not aware of it, then they will dismiss it as well and not see it as a problem as a young man.
Absolutely.
But we know it happens.
That's right.
And you know, I think to be fair here, a lot of people might push back against that and say like, well, they see the news and they're like, you know, if you look, you're a criminal and you need to be, you know, like it's not, hey, they shouldn't be in that situation in the first place. We're talking about people that they're just walking down the road, you know, like part of the listening campaign has to be listening and saying, you know what, there actually is a problem. It's not just, you know, criminals getting arrested. There is a problem. Trayvon Martin, apparently there was a fight at some point after the grown man chased down the kid. The kid was just walking down the street. That's all he was doing. Whatever happened after that, bad things happened. But, you know, to look at that as like, well, he got what he deserved. No, he did not get what he deserved. You know, like there is a problem.
And I would say even stemming from that, I think that's why it's good to have these talks about stereotypes. Because had Zimmerman possibly not had that stereotype that a black man is either dangerous, he's homophobe, I'm going to feel intimidated, he may hurt me, it may have not even happened.
The hoodie on.
But when you have that preconceived notion that, okay, I need to be aware because I have this stereotype in the back of my mind that I am either in harm's way or in danger in some way, then I think that's when things like that happen. But even having these conversations about stereotypes, like, they're not always true.
Right. If it had been a white kid in a polo shirt walking back to his, you know.
Right, it would have probably been a different situation.
Right. All right, we are so bad about time. Let's go on the next couple. I think we'll be a little bit quicker on these. Ebony, this one is more directly for you. It's a stereotype about black women. And the stereotype is that black women are more prone to have aggressive or angry attitudes, which even as I read this, it's just, when I think about my black friends here in Fayette, it's just laughable. Like, some of the sweetest women I know in my life.
Even from Birmingham.
Like, I don't, but I know this stereotype. This is a popular stereotype. Why do you think this stereotype is what it is? Particularly, like, why black women and not black men? Like, what is it specifically about black women? What do you think?
I think for one, it's just like anything that you see on the news. If you see it so many times, or you take one picture, a glimpse of something, and it's an angry, quote-unquote, black woman, then you may take that and say, okay, this must apply to all black women, because I don't know them. So I'm going to put that label on all of them. But I also want to say that when you come across, again, as we discussed, anger comes from a place of pain. Anytime you see someone angry, there's probably some underlying pain that's going on there as well. So women who happen to be black, that happen to be angry and express themselves in that situation, I think we have to pull the layers back and figure out why is that individual angry. Oftentimes, black women are taught to be strong. I was taught to be strong. One thing, I think my mother had to be strong because my mother also went to a divorce. Yeah. She had to know how to take care of her home, take care of the household, pay the bills on her own, raise her children on her own, make sure they got to school. And like I said, she was working 2 or 3 jobs. So she was all stressed to the max most of the time. Anytime someone's stressed, also having pain, anytime they have to express themselves, it's usually going to be in anger. Also, I would say even not, other than just my mom, I think the American culture, the war on drugs, when they took a lot of the black men out of the home and women had, but especially black women, had to be independent and had to take on a strong role, it affected them. It affected the children, the parents, and at the end of the day, it's going to cause some frustration, some anger, and they just don't know how to express that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very good.
So, I think that's where it comes from.
Absolutely.
When you talk about the names that you put on people.
Oh yeah, and the other thing is like they say, now white women, they have a Karen.
Yeah.
I don't know if she's supposed to be an angry white woman or she's
very entitled.
She's entitled, but then she's been doing some nasty things.
Oh yeah, she's vocal.
Very.
So you got Karen and you got Keisha.
So you may have to Keisha.
Keisha and Karen.
No offense to anyone
named
or Keisha's out there.
Right.
You don't know what we're talking about.
But you'll get labeled, and that'll just carry on. Kind of like they'll say the welfare queen. And
I shouldn't throw my mama out there, but my mom is the angry black woman. Sorry about that, mama.
And I'm pretty sure she's been through some stuff, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't happen.
And I've never seen that side of her.
I never.
I've always seen the sweet side. I've never seen that.
No offense to the mamas out there.
Her mama, no, because we love
She's
her.
a sweetheart. That's right.
So let me ask you this too, because so there are times when a black woman is legitimately coming out of a strong personality because she has to be strong. I think there's also times when a black woman might be labeled as aggressive, angry, standoffish, depending on your personality type, when that might not be at all what she's feeling. I mean, have there been any times when maybe you were labeled as, I know you're an introvert like me, so standoffish on that side, when that's not really what you were feeling?
Right. And I absolutely, because I'm an introvert, people don't know how to receive me.
Yeah.
I think most of the time. So I'm just naturally quiet and I kind of stick to myself. And I went through freedom, so I learned rejection and how in order to prevent yourself from being rejected, you will put up a wall. And that's a barrier to say that I'm protecting my heart. Not to say I'm saying anything's wrong with you, but because I don't want to be hurt by your response to me, I'll put up a wall and say, okay, well, I won't overstep the ground. But if someone speaks to me, I will. I may not go out my way, but I will. And then one of my ministry sisters, she said that, she was visiting a church. And it was a pastor, so she embraced him for a hug because he was hugging everyone else at the church. But when she went in, he stopped and put out his hand. That's a feeling that she'll never forget. But it's out of rejection that came. And it was like, I personally, I think I put that barrier up just to protect myself. I don't want to be rejected. Especially being a black woman with, I guess in my profession, with majority all white men. I never know how a white man is going to receive me. So that's even more so when I have to put up a wall just to protect myself. Not to say that I don't want to be included, but I'm not used to being included.
Right.
So it'll automatically give you a shield of protection, like you have to protect yourself.
So somebody might be saying, well, why is she stuck up? And you're like, I'm not sure if this place is even for me. And you're like, I'm not sure how to, I'm afraid of being rejected here.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I don't feel welcome, then I'll naturally just stick to myself.
Yeah. Hey, fellow introvert, I feel you.
Yeah.
Me on the other hand.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to make sure you see me.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Me and Floyd, there we are.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Hey, how you doing?
I'll hug you anyway.
Shake your hand.
That's
right.
One last one, because I know Priscilla's about to have to go.
Yeah.
Boo. She's got to go. But last stereotype is white people automatically think they're better than everybody else. And I think here, one of the softer crimes that the white people have dealt with throughout history is just the feeling like our way is the best way. Mm-hmm. If you read back through like missionaries, for example, we go down into Central America and we're evangelizing and whatnot. But you look at what actually happened many times, it wasn't just going into an area and telling them the good news about Jesus. It was also teaching them how to wear neckties, teaching them how to sing 4-part harmony and sit in straight little pews. And it was bringing Christianity in such a way that this is the right way to do Christianity, disregarding your culture and showing you how to do it in our culture. basically. And I think that's over and over again. That's just one example. That's a part of white history that we've had to come to terms with and grow more respectful and appreciative of cultural diversity and loving many, many different cultures. Look, I still believe Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, but you don't have to put on a necktie to go worship him. Some cultures might sit on a tree and have a way different, musical expression. Jesus is not tied to a culture.
That's right.
But white history, we have forced our culture many times. I say that to say, I believe in the last 200 years, there have been radical advances in this as white culture has worked through this. And I think today there are still hard and ugly truths to be worked through, but we live in one of the most diverse cultures ever. And we have done a lot to work through this. But the stereotype remains. The label sticks to the white man still. You always think you're better than everybody else. And so kind of the last question I want to throw around to the group is do you think the white man will ever be able to shake the label of you're just automatically racist because you're white? What do you think?
I mean, my thought is, the more people are able to have these conversations and build relationships with people that don't look like them, I think that's how you shake that label. I think the more people try to stay in their own corners and don't try to form relationships outside of the people that have the same skin color, I mean, it's going to be hard to shake that label.
We're back to relationships ruin racism.
Relationships ruin racism.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I think because we live in a country that was built on slavery and oppression that came with that, I think it's when that power shift starts to happening, especially with more black women, becoming successful, becoming educated. I think that shift in that dynamic can have an issue. It can be a struggle, and it ruffles some feathers on how are they climbing up this ladder that so many years we have intentionally oppressed them and intentionally made it so they didn't make it. So now all of a sudden they're making it, and there's a shift in power. And I think that when, even now, when having a black woman in the White House, whenever she's there, I don't see her there, but I think that in itself speaks volumes of wow, times are changing. They may not be as quickly as we would hope, but just having equality overall and embracing diversity would make the world different. And you don't have to feel intimidated that these things are changing, but more so that our country is built on a melting pot. Yeah. We can embrace everyone's differences, embrace diversity, have unity, have these conversations about race, and it's okay. It's okay to have other people in different positions and hold different titles, and we can love them the same.
Yes. I think that's such a good point, because of course, everybody's different. You got some that do it well, some that don't do it well. But that's. I think there's two major tests of, I say as a white person, I'm good with black people. I'm not racist at all. But the two major tests come with authority and family. Am I good with a black person in authority and equalizing that authority level? Am I good with a black person up close and personal in my home space? We had a friend that, back to the sports question, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I won't say any names, but his quote was, growing up in a culture where it was, he faced racism, and he said, they were always good with me winning their football games for them, but never to date their daughter. So it was always like, man, I love black people, no racism here, but you step into my home, and now there's a reflex.
Yeah.
I think that's a good conversation to have.
That's a great conversation. Yeah. Maybe we'll have that conversation in upcoming.
I think we should wrap it up on that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you had something.
Yeah.
A quote.
Oh yeah, I was going to read a quote before. I think we can end on this quote. Just something for everyone out there to think about. This particular author wrote this, and I just wanted to give this to everyone just to think about.
And I just want to add, even with that test, people often say, I'm not racist, but even you can ask yourself that question. If you're a white man and you have a daughter, will you let a black child date your daughter? And if your answer is no, then that may be something that you have to work on your heart. Right.
Yeah.
Or at least come out and tell us the reason behind it. Because I at least want to understand the reasoning.
I cannot wait to have that
I would love that.
conversation.
And in any authoritative position,
Yes.
look where we are. There's certain people who won't even allow a black pastor to be over a white church. In the same way, some churches that won't allow a white pastor to be over a black congregation,
or even be in certain positions.
and even certain positions, as far as the judicial system, and in the funeral home, the funeral business. There's certain people who they're not okay with that. So I think that if you can ask yourself those type of questions, whatever your answer is, that determines what you need help with. Where you are with this issue.
Absolutely.
But I'm gonna read this because I know Priscilla has to go. But it says, this is something for everyone to think about. In this particular quote, she says, "When we share our stories with fullness and honesty, we often discover that we're less alone and more connected than we might ever have had to believe." I'm gonna read it again. When we share our stories with fullness and honesty, we often discover that we're less alone and more connected than we might ever have believed.
Absolutely.
And we just end that.
That's good.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank y'all.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thanks so much for joining us this week, and may God use you to spread His peace and reconciliation in your community.